He knocked on my bedroom door after midnight. Just once. Software I didn't move. And I never opened it. What happened before that moment changed everything between me and my son. This isn't just a story about blurred lines. It's about silence, boundaries, and what happens when love gets too close to the edge. Stay with me until the end. You'll understand why some truths are too heavy to speak out loud. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more human stories to life. I never thought I'd be sharing this, but life has a way of taking turns you never expect. My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 44 years old, and I've been a single mom for most of my adult life. My son Caleb is 22 now. We've always been close, just the two of us in a quiet house outside of Denver, getting through life one season at a time. It was early February, one of those bone-chilling nights when the heater struggles to keep up. Caleb had just wrapped up midterms and was back from his campus apartment for a few days. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his shoulders tense from too many hours hunched over a laptop. "You okay?" I asked, watching him settle onto the couch. "Yeah, just drained," he mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Why don't you lie down in my room? It's warmer in there," I offered. He hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Thanks, Mom." I brought him a thick blanket and left the door slightly ajar as I turned off the lights. I figured I'd let him rest for a while before checking in again. But about an hour later, I passed by the room and peeked in. He was lying on top of the covers, fully clothed, shivering a little. The house was freezing. Without thinking too much, I walked in, grabbed an extra throw, and laid down beside him like I used to when he was younger and sick. I didn't expect him to reach for me. At first, it was subtle. He shifted closer, like he was half asleep and searching for warmth. I didn't move. It felt familiar, in a strange way. Then his arm wrapped gently around me, not tightly, just enough to make me freeze. My instinct screamed that something felt off, but I didn't pull away. I told myself he just missed home, missed the comfort, that this was just a tired young man needing some human closeness. But the silence between us was too quiet. I could hear every breath, every shift of fabric. And then I felt it, a firm pressure against my hip. Caleb wasn't asleep. My heart kicked hard in my chest. I stayed completely still, hoping it would go away, hoping I was wrong. But then he whispered my name, softly, carefully. "Mom." I couldn't answer. My mouth went dry. He lifted his head, eyes searching mine, as if asking a question neither of us could say out loud. His hand stayed on my arm, unmoving now, just warm skin on skin. The room felt smaller, the blanket heavier. I wanted to sit up, to make a joke, to reset everything back to normal. But I couldn't move. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what this was anymore. I had spent 2 decades being his anchor, his safe place. And in one moment, I didn't know where I stood anymore. Just as the weight of it all began pressing down on me, there was a knock at the door. A loud, clear knock. I jumped, startled, and so did Caleb. The tension cracked like ice, and he rolled away fast, sitting upright, looking like he'd just woken up from a dream he didn't want to explain. I rushed to the door, heart pounding. It was our neighbor, James. Kind, recently divorced, a familiar face in the neighborhood. He gave me a warm smile. "Hey, Rachel, I know it's late, but I saw your porch light flickering. Thought I'd check in. Everything all right?" I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, all good. Thanks for checking." But I could feel Caleb's eyes on me from the hallway, watching. I closed the door gently behind James, trying to steady my breathing. My hands were still trembling, and my thoughts were a blur. For a moment, the night air from outside had shocked me back into reality, like flipping a switch. But the tension inside the house didn't vanish. When I turned around, Caleb was standing in the hallway. His arms were crossed. His expression was unreadable, not angry, not scared, just tense. I gave him a small, forced smile. Everything's fine. James was just being neighborly. Caleb nodded, but the silence stretched. The air between us felt heavier now, like we were both aware of something neither of us could name. I walked past him, hoping to break the weird energy, but I felt his eyes on me the whole way. When I sat down at the kitchen table, he followed quietly and leaned against the counter watching me. "Sorry," he said suddenly. I looked up. "For what?" "For earlier. I didn't mean to make things weird." His voice was low, unsure. I gave him a soft shake of my head. "You didn't. It's been a long week. You're tired. We both are." He looked down, hands in his hoodie pocket, then slowly walked over and sat across from me. His gaze met mine again, and this time, there was something else there. Not confusion, not even guilt. Something closer to longing. I looked away. We sat there in silence for a few minutes, both sipping tea I hadn't even realized I made. The kitchen light buzzed softly above us, and outside, the wind picked up. I wrapped my hands around the mug, trying to ground myself. "Do you think," Caleb said carefully, "we're too close?" His question hit harder than I expected. I stared at the steam rising from my cup. "I think," I replied slowly, "we've had to lean on each other more than most people do. That's not a bad thing. But sometimes it feels like more," he said. Quiet, almost a whisper. I didn't answer, because I didn't know how. Later that night, after he had gone to bed, or at least to his room, I sat alone on the couch. I kept replaying everything in my head. His voice, the way he looked at me, the pressure under the blanket. The knock at the door had saved us from something. But I didn't know what that something would have been. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, Caleb was already up when I came downstairs. He was dressed, backpack on, ready to head back to campus. "You're leaving early," I said, pouring myself coffee. "Yeah, I've got a study group meeting," he said. But he didn't look me in the eye. I nodded. "Okay." He grabbed his keys and stood by the door for a second too long. Then finally, he said it. "I don't know what last night was, but it's not nothing." My breath caught. He added, "I just need time to figure it out, and maybe you do too." Then he walked out the door, leaving me with a silence deeper than anything we'd shared the night before. The house felt hollow after Caleb left. No music playing upstairs, no half-eaten cereal bowl left in the sink, just quiet, the kind that settles into the corners and stays there like dust. I tried to distract myself, cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, took a walk around the block. But no matter what I did, my mind kept drifting back to his words. "It's not nothing." He wasn't wrong. I kept asking myself, what did that moment mean? Was it just the closeness of two people who had leaned on each other for too long? Or was it something deeper? Something we both felt but never dared to name? That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on the back porch wrapped in a blanket. The cold bit at my cheeks, but I welcomed it. At least it helped me feel something other than confused. A notification buzzed on my phone. "Caleb. Made it back. Long day. Hope you're good." Short, safe, distant. I stared at it for a few seconds before typing, then deleting my reply 4 times. Finally, I just sent, "Glad you got back safe. Take care of yourself." That was it. Days passed. He didn't message again. I kept hoping for something. A call, a longer text, maybe even just a meme he thought I'd laugh at. But silence stretched longer with every hour. By the 5th day, I gave in and called him. It went straight to voicemail. That night, James stopped by again. He had a small toolbox in hand and a smile on his face. "Said I'd fix that rattling fan in your bathroom, remember?" he said. "Didn't want you trying to wrestle it alone." I let him in. He worked while I made coffee. It felt normal, or at least I pretended it did. He told me about his daughter, how she was moving to Oregon for work. I listened, nodded, made the right faces. But all I could think about was Caleb. When James finally stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "You doing okay?" he asked, looking at me a little too closely. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." He nodded, but didn't look convinced. "You're not alone, Rachel," he said gently. "Just remember that." I forced a smile. "Thanks, James." When the door shut behind him, I leaned against it and exhaled a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. Later that night, I opened my laptop. I pulled up an old folder filled with photos of Caleb, baby pictures, birthdays, his graduation day. I paused on one from 3 years ago when he'd come home to surprise me for Mother's Day. He was holding a small bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite. His smile was wide and genuine. He looked so young then, so mine. Now, I wasn't sure what we were to each other anymore. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back to the way things were, or if some part of me was waiting to cross that line again. A week passed, then another. And just like that, 3 weeks had gone by without seeing Caleb. We'd texted here and there, nothing deep, just surface-level check-ins. You okay? Yeah. You? Fine. But nothing about that night. Nothing about what he said at the door. Nothing about the pause we were both pretending wasn't there. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I opened the front door to find him standing on the porch. No warning, no text. Just standing there, hands in his pockets, backpack slung over one shoulder. Hey, he said, voice quiet. Hey. I tried to sound casual, but my chest tightened the moment I saw him. You busy? I shook my head and stepped aside. Come in. He dropped his bag near the couch and looked around the house like it felt unfamiliar. It had only been a few weeks, but something had shifted. I could feel it. So could he. I was driving back from class, he said, and just ended up here. You hungry? He shrugged. Could eat. So I made grilled cheese. Something simple, something safe. We ate in silence, like two people avoiding a minefield. Then he said it. I've been thinking about everything. I froze, sandwich halfway to my mouth. He continued, and I don't think I misunderstood what I felt that night. I slowly lowered my plate. The room suddenly felt smaller. Caleb, I'm not saying it was okay. I'm just saying it was real. He looked at me, eyes steady, searching. You felt it too, didn't you? My throat tightened. There it was. The question I'd been running from since the night James knocked on our door. I stood and began clearing plates, needing something, anything, to do with my hands. We're mother and son, I said quietly. Whatever it was, it can't happen again. But that doesn't mean it wasn't there. His voice didn't shake. He wasn't emotional, just honest. And somehow, that was worse. I turned back to him. You're young, Caleb. You've got your whole life ahead of you. This, what we almost stepped into, it's confusion, intensity, familiarity mistaken for something else. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. I've been around other people, dated, talked. It's never felt like that, not once. And I don't think it's just because you're familiar. I didn't know what to say, because a small, terrified part of me agreed. And that was the problem. I took a step back, trying to stay calm. You're staying here tonight? Only if that's okay. I nodded slowly. The guest room's made up. He stood, walked past me, then paused in the hallway. I don't want to hurt you, Mom. I'm just trying to be honest. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same boy I raised, the same man he was becoming, and something else too. Something I didn't have a name for. Good night, Caleb, I said softly. He nodded and disappeared into the guest room, leaving me alone in a house that suddenly felt too full and too empty at the same time. The next morning, I woke up early. Not because I had to, but because sleep had become impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, my thoughts drifted back to the kitchen table, to Caleb's voice, to the weight of what he said. It's never felt like that, not once. He wasn't trying to be inappropriate, that much I believed. He was just trying to understand feelings that didn't fit any category. So was I. I poured myself coffee and stared out the window at the backyard. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds, and everything about the day felt suspended, like the whole world was holding its breath. Caleb walked into the kitchen just after 7. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Morning, he said. Morning. He grabbed a banana off the counter and leaned against the fridge, watching me. The silence between us wasn't as sharp as the night before, but it still pulsed with unspoken thoughts. Thanks for letting me crash, he said. You're always welcome here, I replied, keeping my voice even. He nodded but didn't move. Then, carefully, he said, "You don't have to pretend you didn't feel it too." I looked at him, my hands gripping the coffee mug tighter. "You think that helps, Caleb? Making it real by naming it?" "I think hiding it is worse." I placed the mug down, trying to find the right words. Something that wouldn't hurt him. Something that wouldn't make this any more confusing. "You're not wrong," I said finally. "But just because something feels real doesn't mean it's right." He blinked, taking in my words. "I know," he said. "That's the hard part." The next few hours passed slowly. We didn't talk about it again. We watched a movie, went for a walk, talked about work, school, even the dog next door that never stopped barking. It felt almost normal. Almost. But the undercurrent never went away. The glances, the long silences, the moments that felt like they could tip into something more, if one of us said the wrong thing, or the right one. That night after dinner, he helped me wash the dishes. We stood side by side at the sink, our arms brushing occasionally. When the last plate was done, I turned to grab a towel and found him standing closer than I expected. Too close. I froze. "Rachel?" he said, softly. The way he said my name didn't sound like a son talking to his mom. "Don't," I whispered, stepping back instinctively. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking for the first time. I don't know how to shut it off." My heart was pounding. "I know," I whispered, "but we have to. We don't have a choice." He looked away, ashamed. I hated seeing him like that. But more than that, I hated how part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort him the way I always had, to tell him it would be okay, even when I wasn't sure it would be. That night, he stayed in the guest room again. I laid awake in mine, eyes fixed on the ceiling, wondering when things would start to feel normal again, if they ever could. Then, sometime after midnight, I heard a knock on my door. Just once. Software I didn't move. A few seconds passed. Then I heard his footsteps slowly retreating down the hallway. He didn't try again, and I never opened the door. The next morning, he was gone. No note, no text. Just an empty guest room, the sheets still a little warm. At first, I thought maybe he went for a walk, but then I checked the driveway. His car was gone too. I stood there in the hallway, frozen in place, my hand resting on the edge of the doorframe. A part of me wanted to call him, to demand an explanation. Another part understood. I went back to the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee I didn't want, sat at the table we'd both stood at 2 nights before, and stared out the window. He didn't try the door again, and I didn't open it. That was our unspoken agreement. By noon, a text finally came through. "Caleb. Didn't want to make it harder. I just needed space. I'll reach out soon. Please don't worry." I read it 3 times before replying, "I understand. Take the time you need." No heart emoji. No "love you." Just clean, clear space between 2 people who were trying not to drown in a moment that never should have happened. Weeks passed. Spring came early that year. The snow melted faster than usual. Birds returned. The house creaked less in the mornings. Life, somehow, kept moving forward. We still texted, brief updates, little things. But we never talked about that night. And part of me hoped we never would, because I didn't know what I'd say or what I'd do if he told me he still felt the same. Then, one Saturday morning, I opened the door and found a small package on my porch. No label, no note. Inside was a framed photo, one I hadn't seen before. It was from 2 summers ago. Caleb and me at the lake, his arm around my shoulder, both of us laughing. We looked so happy, so normal. The kind of moment you don't question. And on the back, written in his handwriting, "This is who we are." I stood there holding it, letting the weight of those words settle into my chest. He wasn't erasing what happened, but he was drawing a line, a reminder, a choice, and I knew, deep down, I had to do the same. That night, I placed the photo on the mantle, centered it, stood back, took a breath. Whatever that moment was, it was over. But what we had, the bond, the closeness, the years of being everything to each other, that didn't have to be broken. We were still family, just a little bruised. Maybe we always would be. Final words for the audience. Some stories don't have clean endings. Some connections blur the lines we thought were unshakable. But sometimes, the strongest love is the one that steps back, not the one that leans in. Thanks for staying with us through this story. If it moved you, even just a little, give it a like. It helps us keep sharing stories that matter. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe. We have more real, complicated human stories coming your way. Until next time.